So let's take another example of an English language paper 1, Explorations in Creative Reading and Writing. We're just again going to just look at the first half of this, the section that is going to assess you on the quality of your reading. So this is very, very straightforward reading and comprehension. Just have a little checklist through, as we usually do. Answer all questions, black ink, fill in the boxes at the top of this page. There it is, that bit there. Okay. Stay calm. Don't write outside the boxes. If you need extra space for your answers, use the lined pages at the end of this book. Do all the rough work in this book and cross through any work that you do not want to be marked. You must refer to the inset booklet provided. You must not use a dictionary. Okay, so we're looking at the first 40 marks. You're reminded of the need for good English and clear presentation in your answer. Do you know what that means? It means a few long words and paragraphs so that the examiner can see what you're doing, and every paragraph has a concept assigned to it. So just do it. You're not to number them, you're not to make bullet points, but just to have a clear presentation of a logical argument that you're making. You're advised to spend about 15 minutes reading through the source and all 5 questions you have to answer. You're advised to plan your answer to question 5 before you start to write. Okay, let's move into it. And so we refer to the insert booklet, and we have a look at this extract. It's from the beginning of a novel by Judith Olmert, published in 2015. It is set in a house that used to be part of a 19th century silk factory. Rosie and her 2 children, Sam and Cara, now live in the house. Okay, so it's a modern book. It's an up-to-date book, and it's got a connection with the past. That's what we know so far. So you imagine one of those houses, like a big terraced house in London, something like that, and it's been there for a couple of 100 years, maybe. That's the idea, a 19th century silk factory. So it's a connection story, maybe. Rosie and her 2 children. Okay, again, as I usually do with this, I'm going to encourage you to scan read and to pick up points as they come and do it almost off the cuff, but just make a little quick analysis as we go. I'm doing this, making one word stand for the concept in each paragraph to build up an idea of the developing structure of the story. Okay, so on the first day at the house that Rosie saw the stranger child. Dun, 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 standing at the sink, her hands deep in suds. She's overwhelmed with what's in front of her. Tired after the long drive from London the evening before. Okay, so it's not London, it's outside. The long drive from London. She gazed vaguely at the sunlit, overgrown garden where Sam and Cara were playing. Okay, so these are younger children then, they're not teenagers. They're younger children. The sash window had old glass that blunted the image, wavering the straightness of fence and washing line, pulling things out of shape. So she's not seeing quite clearly, and she's absorbed in another task, and she's got loads of stuff on her mind. Okay. Sam's kneeling in a patch that Rosie cleared, making hills and valleys for his matchbox cars. Okay, so he could be very young, could be 4 or 5, something like that. 3, by digging with an old tablespoon. Cara was toddling from bush to bush with a yellow plastic watering can. So she might be even younger. It says toddling. 3, 2. Through the antique glass, Rosie watched them stretch and shrink. Nice little combination of verbs, isn't it? And alliteration. Just sort of notice things as you go through, okay? As if she was looking through ripples, going on about this glass. She's not seeing them clearly. All right. She closed her eyes, glad of a moment of calm after the trauma of the last few days. All right. What's the trauma? Letting go of a plate, she spread her tense fingers, allowing the warmth of the water to soothe her. This is one stressed lady. When she opened her eyes, another child was there. Okay, now that's a note of alarm, isn't it? There shouldn't be another child there. This is a mother, and it looks like it may be a single mother, maybe a newly single mother. Maybe that's the trauma. We don't know, but the alarm bells start ringing. Somebody else is there. Is that a threat, or is that okay? Is that just being neighborly, or is it something to respond to? She made a quick check of the unfamiliar garden. The bottom half was an overgrown mess, a muddle of trees. An ancient mulberry tree stood in the center. Okay. Gigantic malformed hand. So that's a massive big personification, isn't it? And it's something very graphic, and it's also something spooky, like a crippled claw. The trunk of the tree was snarled with a tangled ivy that grew through the broken bricks, led through the fence, marked the garden off from an orchard beyond, disappeared into a mass of nettles. So we've got a lot of vocabulary there that deals with mystery, tangled, overgrown, and then this ancient mulberry tree. So what's our score so far? Well, okay, introduction to Rosie, number 1. Rosie looking through the glass, introduction to the family, number 2. And then the climax, another child was there. There's an incursion into her family, number 3. Okay, description of the garden, the garden. So the camera started right inside on Rosie. It's looked out to Rosie's children, and now it's looking out to the bigger context of the garden. And now we get to the point. This is a sort of in brackets from 14 to 23. And now we get to the point, another child. Okay, what is this other child? Here she comes. Next paragraph, a little girl. Okay, little girl, doesn't sound a threat. Clump of daisies. A back to Rosie, holding tight to the handle of a large wicker basket. Cara seemed unfazed by the girl's presence and continued to move engrossed along the row of plants. Did she not see her? Why is that? Why is she not looking at her? If you were a little toddler, you would be into this straight away, wouldn't you? Okay, the child was small, maybe 8 or 9, though something in the tense hunch. That's lovely, isn't it? The tense hunch. We've already looked at the tenseness in Rosie's fingers. Now we're looking at the tense hunch of this little girl. Made her seem older. Her hair hung down her back in a matted, dusty-looking plait, and she was wearing dressing-up clothes, an ankle-length dress and pinafore in washed-out greys and tans, like a homemade Cinderella costume. Okay, so it's unusual. Dressing up clothes from another age, something like Cinderella, which the text usually tells you, Cinderella, a poor girl from a fairy tale, as if you didn't know that. Okay, and then the next, so that paragraph is the little girl. Next paragraph is who, where, why? It's a sort of rhetorical burst of question. Where had she come from? Well, and then we're led into Rose's thought process. She must be a neighbor's child. How she got in? It's too high for the child to climb. The child glanced over her shoulder back towards the houses, a quick furtive movement, as if she was scanning the upper windows of the row, afraid of being overlooked. So now into this little, quite domestic scenario, you've got the note of fear and anxiety. Rosie caught a glimpse of her face, pale and drawn with anxiety. The girl turned back, reached forward, tucked a piece of white trailing cloth into the basket. Almost unconsciously, Rosie recognized that the girl was left-handed by herself, like herself. And there was something animal-like in her movements. That's interesting, isn't it? This is just the beginning of a novel, so it's trying to tease your interest and connect you. just as through Rosie has her own backstory, and we don't know what that is yet, but also this girl has a backstory, and there's little moment of connection there, saying the girl is left-handed. Oh, I'm left-handed. And then this strange descriptor, animal-like, like a darting of a mouse or the flit of a sparrow. You think of those creatures, think of a mouse and a sparrow, think how vulnerable they are, think how little thin bones they both possess, and how they are prey to many other creatures. So they always have to live life on the lookout. That's the picture that's being drawn through this analogy, through this. It's a metaphor, it's a picture. Okay, so note it in your mind, and then we move on. Some small, dun creature that moves fast to blend into the background. Okay, you almost need another drum roll. And then something wasn't right here. She had seen distress in those eyes. Now that's a paragraph, and it's a one-line paragraph. And it's a very powerful, that's what you do. When you have a one-line paragraph, you use it for a shock and awe moment. It's a kind of boom, like that. What do you think of that? And the point that's being made is there is an appeal, a new appeal being made to Rose's motherliness. Something wasn't right here. She had seen distress in those eyes. So now the first reaction of Rosie is suspicion, anxiety for her children. There's something not right here. Danger, 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 like somebody pressing an alarm button. But now a new note is being sounded. This is a child in distress, and I have to do something about it. A different kind of parental pull. Rosie turned away, dried her hands hurriedly, slipped on her flip-flops, little note that this is summertime, warm outside. She would go gently, raise no challenge about her being in the garden, but say hello and try to find out what was the matter. Maybe she pointed out that her mother would be worrying where she was. She could persuade the girl to let her take her home. But when she stepped outside, the child was gone. Okay, so now we've got the picture of, did Rosie imagine it? Is this a ghost? Was there really a child there who's now hiding behind the ancient mulberry tree? Well, we don't know. That's the end of the source. But do you see how this opening section leads you into wanting to know what happened next? It's the mark of a good story, a great story. Okay, so let's just have a little flip over and look at the first part of the source, lines 1 to lines 4, list 4 things about Rosie from this part of the source. So you want to be doing something like this. You have 4 bullet points in under 4 minutes. Okay, so here's the 4 lines. It was on their first day at the house that Rosie saw the strange child. Okay, so 4 things about Rosie. She's overwhelmed by the task that lay ahead of her. That's a good quote. She's tired after the long drive from London the evening before, and she's looking out on the sunlit, overgrown garden where Sam and Cara were playing. So we know that we can assume she's a mother. We can say that she is tired and has a lot, physically tired, to the point of not looking straight, gazing vaguely, and that she is overwhelmed by the tasks. She has a lot of things to do, and she's presently doing them. So we've probably got enough for 4 points there. They almost tell you what to put, don't they? You're almost going to quote all of that and then make some comment about what Rosie is like. 4 things about Rosie. Dump, 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 dump. So you can probably get that done in under 4 minutes, and you've got your first 4 marks out of 40, which is good, isn't it? Okay. Okay. Look at the next part now, from line 14 to 23. And this is the part about the garden. How does the writer use language here to describe the garden? And this time you're thinking about 8 to 10 minutes, and you're looking for 8 marks. So let me just annotate onto here. And how does the writer use language? You could look at words and phrases, language features and techniques, sentence forms. Well, the big one I noticed before is this one, like a giant malformed hand. The tree is like a giant malformed hand. Malformed means badly formed. So that's why I use the word crippled. And it is very evocative of a tree, isn't it? And now I notice that it says knuckles. So this is by nature of a personification. Okay, personification in there. And let's just get back to this one here. You get the idea. And it says it was snarled and tangled. And these words choking. Always look at the verbs and think about how the verbs are. You could have done other words. There's almost an infinite number of choices. So why has the writer used these words? Well, it's picked up a couple of, the personification is being developed into a metaphor. The knuckles are in the earth, like that, something that is emphasized when it talks about Rose's fingers. Do you remember Rose's fingers and tense fingers? Okay, and now knuckles in the earth makes it sound like fists. So there's the same suggestion of tension and anxiety. Then it says snarled, which takes you into what you do with your mouth when you pull your mouth out of shape. Then tangled ivy, broken bricks, chunks of things, choking it, choking it, which is something else that you do with, well, I hope you don't, but something that can be done with hands that's unpleasant. There's a slightly negative context being drawn here through the description of the tree. So do you think of, that's how the writer is describing the garden. How does it? It uses the description of the garden to talk about what? To talk about the story that is about to unfold. It's tangled, it's grown, there's broken bits of the past all there. And this giant malformed hand has its knuckles in the ground, snarled with ivy and being choked through these broken bricks and chunks of cement. So there's a tension between the past and the present. And let's see. Okay, we can see the word unfamiliar. So she's looking at something for the first time. Interesting. Then you've got something that's a level of mystery here. So she uses language to, let's just put that down. The language represents mystery. It also represents a, let's call it a tangle. Oops, tangle. Past and present. It's a metaphor for the whole story. Everything is being put into place here. And notice another one here, which is very important. Massive, twisted. Look at the way just think of the points of speech, adjectives. How are the adjectives used? Massive means it's overshadowing. Twisted means it might be perverse. So it's picking up a picture of, we've got to say, anxiety and possible danger based around the past. Okay, do you think you could get 8 marks out of that? I think so. It's all quite here. We need to get gnarled into there. We've got broken. And then we've got the sense of mystery with disappeared into a mass of nettles and brambles before it reached the padlocked door. It's a good finish, isn't it? Because it's like it bringing it to a full stop. There is an end to this garden, a mass, but there's a lot of mystery and mess and tangle within it. Okay, I love it. It's really, really well drawn. Okay, and let's tell you what, let's just clear the drawings and go on to the next bit. So that's your description one. That's your language features question. Just run through it in your mind. Do I see any alliterations, any metaphors, any analogies, any personification? All that stuff that you've done. There's a whole list of things, but more than that, don't just tick them off. See why they're there and try to get to the point of what the writer is going towards. Now, the next question is an 8-mark question. So you're going to spend about 8 minutes on this, and it's a structure question. The text is from the beginning of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Okay, what does the writer focus your attention on at the beginning of the source? How and why does the writer change this focus as the source develops? Anything else? So this is where your paragraph game comes in, and you can almost do this without looking. We'll probably look back. Let's see if we can do it from memory now. Where does it start? Oh yes, the woman, Rosie. We're introduced straight away into the name. We know that maybe she's not going to be the hero, but she's going to be central to it. We're seeing a lot of things through her eyes. So think of it like a film. Where is the opening scene? Well, maybe it's on her hands. Maybe the camera starts with her hands doing the dishes, and then it pans up and shows her face. Maybe there's worried lines on her face, and that's how the camera will tell you that she's anxious. She's got arms, sleeves rolled up, and she's working away. And maybe around her in the kitchen, the camera is picking up boxes of stuff because she hasn't properly moved into the house. And she's looking a little bit worriedly, but she's got it sorted. The gate is padlocked. Her 2 little kids are in the back garden. She's doing the dishes, and she looks up. Yeah, all right. She's watering the flowers. He's playing with his toy cars. Okay, looks up again. There's a child there. Okay, so what does the writer focus your attention on? Okay, Rosie. How does it change? Okay, it goes through Rosie towards her kids. That's her primary concern, is her kids. Then past the kids, it goes into the garden. And now we're told what kind of a garden it is, what kind of a house it is. It's big, it's old, it's tangled. It's a bit almost mysterious, a mass of nettles. But Mum has got it sorted. There's a padlocked door. She knows where her kids are. She's just saying, okay, I've done number 4. Now I'm going to get on to number 5. There's a lot to do tonight. Are my kids happy? And then the big structural feature that interests me is the way that the writer uses paragraphs to do, that word cliffhanger. When she looked up, there was a 3rd child. That's a cliffhanger. It's leaving you hanging over the cliff. You have to read on, saying, what? Yeah, what's that? How did that work out? So that is how the writer has structured the text to interest you as a reader. Let's just glance through. Okay, so we know that this is coming because we're introduced to it straight away. We're given a paradoxical sentence that almost doesn't make sense. The writer doesn't say the strange child, uses this odd phrase, the stranger child, the stranger child. Isn't that peculiar? The child who is a stranger, the child who is strange to me. Okay, so again, Rosie, structure part 1, and the kids, part 2, with including introduction to the house. And then a teasy one here, the garden, a quick check of the unfamiliar garden. That's a bit coy because it's just a way of introducing this giant malformed hand analogy, and then the stuff that we've already looked at. Okay, but that's what Mum does. She's just checking what is going on. Another child. And then we're introduced to the other child, the next one. This is how the camera is working. Okay, it's focusing now on the other child. Look at her clothes, look at her stance, look at her shoulders, look at her hair. And then the next bit is another cliffhanger. Where had she come from? You see, that question is done really well because you, the reader, are being asked the question. It's great. It's great. and you don't know. You don't know. And then you've got the connection. She's looking around, but she doesn't see, nobody sees her, and she doesn't seem to see anybody else. And then you've got the next cliffhanger, which is Rose's mother nature coming out. She had seen distress. Okay, and the next one, Rose's decision. Do you see how the camera has gone from almost inside Rose's brain into her children, into the garden, seeing the girl, and then into the girl? So Rosie is there's a lot of empathy there, isn't there? And then Rosie makes her decision. I'm going to sort this out right now. And then another cliffhanger, another shock and awe one-line paragraph. But when she stepped outside, the child was gone. Okay, so I hope you can see how straightforward it is to look at that part of this question. We've seen how the focus works. Why change the focus? Because this is the story. This is the story. It's obviously going to be something a bit like a ghost story or a past and present story. And the writer is changing the focus to take you out of somebody's interior perspective into a mystery. So that's why the focus is being changed. Okay, let's move on. So what comes next, do you think? What do you guess is going to come next? Well, it's the big one next. It's the 20-mark one. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 24. A student said, they often do this, you know, a reply from a class, from a student. Okay. I wasn't at all surprised by the disappearance of the stranger child at the end of this extract. The writer has left us in no doubt that she is just part of Rose's imagination. Now, it doesn't matter whether you agree with that or disagree. The answer is always yes and no. And this is put here to enable you to discuss it and think about it. I wouldn't tend to agree with it myself, but I'd have to give reasons for disagreeing with it. I wasn't at all surprised by the disappearance. So, but let's argue that this is perfectly correct. So yeah, Rosie is stressed. Rosie is tired. Rosie has a lot of things on her mind and a lot of things to do that day. That's been re-emphasized. And even the garden, she just cleared a little space so that her boy can play. But there's a mass of nettles. There's loads more to do. So she is overwhelmed. And that's the big word about Rosie. So secondly, it says that the glass is not clear. The glass is not clear. It's antique glass. It's obscured. It's streaked. It's, you know, it might even be dirty at this point. So she can see where her children are, but she's not seeing clearly. So she's tired and stressed, and her vision is obscured. And then the writer has left us. So you can talk about all that, and that needs to be discussed, because that is to the extent to which you agree. And then you can start to turn it around and say, no, Rosie is a mother. A mother is going to know exactly the danger signals that she needs to respond to for her children. If the tree had been dead and overhanging, she might have looked up a little bit to see if the branches were going to fall on her children. If the wall was crumbling because it was old, she might have looked at it, given it a tentative nudge to see if it was safe. She might want to check that the padlock was secure and still in place, and not that the gate wasn't rotted off its hinges. So she is not going to make up the appearance of a threat. She's not going to imagine the appearance of a threat. So to that extent, I would disagree with what this student said. Consider the disappearance of the stranger child. What are the options? Okay, she's hiding in the bushes. She's a ghost. You know, that's a way off beam, but it's the kind of novel possibility, isn't it? She is a neighbor who somehow got in through a way behind the mass of nettles that we've not seen, etc., etc. So you can sort of think, consider the disappearance of the strange child. Now evaluate how the writer presents the stranger child. Well, how is it? Well, okay, it's presented as Cinderella. It's presented as somebody in dressing up clothes from 100, 200 years ago or something. So it's presented in that strange way. Is Rosie prone to daydreaming? Is she fantasizing about something? Did she have another daughter that she lost? You know what I mean? We're not told any of that. So we just have to evaluate based on the text. We have to narrow our mind down, because it says in the next part, support your response with references to the text. So you work through, this is 20 marks, so you're going to give it about 20 minutes or so. Just start yourself writing by, start with an introduction. To what extent do you agree? And you always say the same thing with these kind of things. You say, to a certain extent, I do agree. To a certain extent, I disagree. And I agree because Rosie's stressed and tired and overwhelmed, and she's looking through obscured glass. She's not seeing clearly. She's looking through her tiredness, and she's just sort of thinking, maybe she's thinking thoughts about living in an old house and imagining what it used to be like. And then all of a sudden she's imagined something just for a minute. She goes outside and I must have made that up. So you can kind of agree, yeah, it's part of the imagination. As if you're taking part in a debate. Just do it like that. And then pull back and say, no, I disagree. Rosie is a mother. She knows what's what with her kids. She's going to analyze. She's going to do a mental risk assessment wherever her children are. This child has suddenly appeared and then suddenly disappeared. And the reason I know that this is not her imagination is that Rosie responds as a mother to stress on the face of the little girl. There's something not right here. So she immediately rises up to sort it out, to take the little child home. Okay, and that's how you're going to do it. So you're going to do introduction, what you're doing, then you're going to do agreeing with its imagination, disagreeing with the imagination, and then concluding with your own thoughts, as I've just chucked a few out here. And you'll be writing a couple of sides, and let's see how much they give you. They give you half a side, 1, 2, 3 sides. Okay, so they give you 3.5 sides. Some of that might be for rough as well, but think about how you do that. Introduction, point 1, point 2, conclusion. Sort of mini essay, just write for 20 minutes. And then if you've written 2 sides and you feel you've covered it, then just leave it. And then if you get a chance, come back to it later. Okay, and that's the first half of this. Do you see how straightforward it is? Well, we'll just glance at the creative writing option, which we'll come into in future sessions, how to do that. Now with the second half of it, you're advised to spend 45 minutes on this section. This is your creative writing component. And it's very often phrased like this. You're in a competition and you've got to write a description of a mysterious place. So the connection with the story is simply the idea that this garden belonging to this house is a mysterious place. And that's what the writer is trying to suggest. And now they give you another mysterious place. Looks like a very weird, round, kind of hobbit hole type of arrangement. Okay, maybe these are bushes, but it looks like a strange circle. And then these graveyard gates open, and then trees in the background and blue mist. Okay, and then the other connection with the story is write a story about an event that cannot be explained. Now, the reason I'm just mentioning this is how it ties in with what you've just done and how it might help you understand what they're trying to get at. This is something that can't be explained, and this is something that's mysterious. So that's the connection with the creative writing. So we'll leave it at that. And then in a future session, we'll start to look at how you do your creative writing component. But until then, okay, have a good day. I'll see you in the next session.